So, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the first Confessions of a Business Owner webinar of 2021, the first of many, hopefully. And I'm absolutely delighted this afternoon to welcome Carolyn Hobdey of Mayday. She's an author, she's a transformational coach, she's a writer, a speaker, and she's going to talk to us in some depth this afternoon about why we need to live the right life, why we can't live a life that's full of regrets. And I know certainly I'm looking very much forward to this. You know, some presets in my personal life from my family expectations that that I fought against. So really kind of keen to get under the bonnet with this, Carolyn. So yeah, welcome. Good afternoon to you, Carolyn, and good afternoon to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's great. Look, I didn't realize I was the first one of 2021, so that's quite nice. I'm hoping I'm going to set the standard at the right level.
Yeah, absolutely. So look, Carolyn, just let's get straight to it. You know, you've been on a journey over the last couple of years to really get your story out there and really help that transformational change with the people that you work with. But you know, for those that don't know you very well, for those that have not bought your book and indulged recently, just if you can rewind for us, what was that pivotal moment for you? What was that moment where you said something here needs to change and you decided to take action?
I guess in some ways I almost had two of those moments. So the first of those came in July 2018. It was actually Friday the 13th of July 2018. Unlucky for some, and it turned out to be an unlucky day for me. So I was at that stage, I'd been in a job, so I've had a long corporate career in HR. I'd had 20 plus years at working at a senior level. I'd worked for some of the world's largest employers. I'd worked for some of the most recognizable brands, the kind of household names that we all have in our cupboards. So I'd had a fantastic career doing that. I was working for an organization, and let's just say that my boss said some stuff and then wrote some stuff, which was ill-advised, and it meant that my position became untenable and I needed to leave. And as is often the case, unfortunately, is that whilst he had sort of made the mistakes and done the stuff wrong, I was the one that had to leave that particular situation. And I'd loved that job. I'd loved the team. I'd worked really hard building that team. I'd been there for, I think it's about 3.5 years. And so I was in that process. I was completely devastated that I was having to leave this job and my team behind, and the circumstances in which it had happened. So I was, I think, about 10 days sort of into that devastation when my partner of 3 years walked into the bedroom one morning on Friday the 13th of July and told me that when our house sale went through, because we were selling our house, our relationship was over. I needed to leave, and I would never see my step family ever again. Okay. So in the space of 10 days, I lost my home, I lost my job, I lost my family, and I lost my relationship. And so that was my first kind of pivotal moment, because that was the point where, like, my whole life, everything that I've relied on, all of my stability, everything that sort of we see that makes us successful, the whole lot was just razed to the ground. And it was just one of those massive moments where I just had to then have a look at, well, how the hell did I get to this point? What happened? And, you know, and I talk about it very honestly in my book and within my business, that I reached the point of suicide on the back of it. So if it had not been for a fantastic, well, who wasn't even a friend at the time, he was actually a business associate who I rang one day when I was in my car and I was out of control and I wanted to die, I wouldn't be here today. You know, God only knows what would have happened. But so I talk very honestly about that and sort of about my mental health and that battle. And so that was kind of the first moment, really, because I had to press reset, not just sort of on my life, but on fundamentally who I was, because I had to take a look at all the things I'd done and all the actions I'd taken. And I have to say, all the red flags in my life. So I'd spent, you know, by that point, probably about 4 decades ignoring various red flags, particularly in my personal life. So my professional life would look amazing. My academic life, you know, I've been very successful. I've got a first degree, I've got a master's degree, got various other things, you know, accolades and things under my belt. But my personal life had just been an absolute car crash, and it was all based on my low self-worth. So so that was kind of the first moment, and I set about sort of picking myself up, and I'm sure we'll get into a bit more sort of the how I did that. But what happened was that once I was at the point of sort of picking myself back up, I started to put back in place all of the kind of accepted tenets of success. And I was in the process of buying the lovely house. I'd got myself another big corporate job, you know, the nice car, and all of that stuff was being put back in place. And I was right on the brink of sort of putting the last bit of the jigsaw of that in place. And I just had this kind of, it was kind of a growing sense really, but I ended up with this epiphany that I was like, actually, none of that stuff is making me happy. You know, I just thought, right, I've sorted myself out. That's amazing. You know, I'm putting all the bits back in place. So everybody in my life is, you know, is going to be sort of happy and they can stop worrying about me. But this awful growing feeling that actually this is not at all what I wanted. So that was kind of when the second moment came really. And that was, probably about 6 months after the first moment. And I just realized that I just didn't want to do this anymore. And the corporate world and all of that stuff wasn't for me. And I wanted to do something fundamentally different. And that started the process that took a year. It took a year for me to then work my way through that and then unpick that life. But that's how I got to where I am today.
And that's fascinating, isn't it? Because, you know, I talk a lot, and that you know, this series of webinars is about helping business owners understand the importance of purpose, and why, if your purpose is really dialed in, you can get crystal clear clarity on what building a successful business means. And often when a business owner is not building the right business, they don't have that purpose dialed in to dial back to. Do you think, in hindsight, with your professional life, you know, you're saying there it appeared great, your academic life appeared great. Were you in some respects going through the motions and this was the kick up the backside you needed? Or was everything professionally good and it was just the personal life and the low self-worth that needed some attention?
No, I think it was the corporate stuff as well. I think more and more I was square peg in a round hole. And that's what my last couple of corporate roles really taught me, probably more than the last couple, to be honest. I think that my need to be myself and my need to be an individual, I just hadn't realized how strong that was. And so I think in the corporate world, you know, I could play the game, but I've never been one that could do the politics. You know, my integrity is like really, really high. You know, I think I have a really strong moral compass, and therefore, you know, I just at times I just couldn't play that corporate game. And what I talk about quite a lot in my business that really sort of gets me fired up is I spent years dimming my light, and I did that personally, and I was doing it professionally. And there were times professionally when it could come out. And I think the sad thing about the job that I left, I loved that. I think I was starting to feel like I could shine that light a bit more there than I had previously. But, you know, a new manager came in and just gradually that light started to have to dim again. So it was both really, because I just wasn't being true to who I really was and who I needed to be. So I think I was just out of place in both parts of my life.
Yeah, and that resonates with me, because I spent 25 years working for other people, and the last 10 years in a FTSE 100 business, and I was that square peg in that round hole. And while everybody else around me was saying that, you know, black was white when it wasn't, I was the one saying, well, hang on a minute, that's not quite right. And if you didn't comply, you were kind of pushed to one side, and so that totally resonates with me. Carolyn, what from your, you know, you've obviously set out on this journey, this transformational change for your clients, and the book that you've recently launched. So again, just give us a little bit of an insight into what that's all about. What is your driving purpose? What change are you wanting to make with the people that you work with?
It's absolutely, and I talk about it in its really simplest form. It's about helping people to define what happiness means for them. So it's stop living up to those expectations. It's stopping living that life of shoulds and saying, like, this is what our life should look like, and this is what success should look like, and saying, actually, what does it mean to you, and what does then fundamentally what happiness means to you? And that's what really drives me, is about that ability to, sort of step into that, and a bit like you say, stepping into that purpose of yourself, but seeing that in your life as a whole. And absolutely the bit that you said at the start, that getting to the end of your life and not having it, and whenever that might be, we don't know when it's going to end for us. Heaven forbid, it could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be in 50 years. We don't know that, but it's like in the moment, in a way that if it did end next week or in 50 years time, you've that sort of values set that you have, and therefore you can go, do you know what, I have no regrets about either the person I've been or the things that I've done. And that's really what the essence of it is, in helping people to do that.
Do you know, I had a conversation with somebody at a networking event. It'd be a year ago now, because we've obviously not networked for that long, and they were employed, and they were telling me that they didn't particularly like the job that they were in. They were in the public sector. They didn't particularly like the job they were in. They didn't like the boss, and they felt that they were going through the motions. And I actually said to them, so change it, so leave and get a job. And his comment to me was, I've only got 9 years of this to see through before I get my pension. Nine more years of being unhappy, working for a boss that you don't like, just so you can get a pension. To do what with? And I just don't get it. But why are so many people kind of going round and round like hamsters in a wheel? Why do they do that?
Yeah, and I think that, and I think it's probably some of the reasons why I did it. I conditioned, certainly when I was growing up, particularly by my parents, of, and I came from a very typical, working class background, and very much that thing that the pension was the thing. Getting enough money for your pension was the thing. And I'm not saying that that's not important, because it is important, and we do need to sort of plan ahead, but we do it at the expense of living right now. And I think that that's the thing. We sort of think that we have time. We have this weird illusion that like we have time, or we have bags of it, where we suddenly realize we don't have a load of time. We are really here for a very short time. All of it's relative and I think that sometimes, and you hear it, don't you, when people have a really significant this and that last year, whether it's been coronavirus itself, or people who have had health issues as a result of not being able to get treatment because of coronavirus or get a diagnosis. So we have a significant health scare. Something really close to us passes away, and you have that like mortality moment. For me, it was the fact that I faced into my own desire to die, if I'm completely honest, and thought, wow, like that could have happened in a moment and I could have been gone, and what would have been left of me in this world? What would have people said? So we have this weird illusion that we have a load of time. And also the other illusion that we sort of labor under is the fact that other people can read our thoughts, and that other people, why is nobody bringing to me what I want, whether that's at work or at home, in my personal life? Because we sort of think that people will just know. If they spend time with, they'll just know what it is that we want or what we need. And like they don't, unless we articulate it. So I think I'm not saying we live in the moment at the expense of everything else. Absolutely not. But we just don't have that time. We don't, and we waste it. You can always make more money, but you can't make more time. And it's absolutely, that's the thing for me of trying to live that way.
Again, it's another anecdote, but it's a number of years ago now, but I had a couple of friends that they had quite a hefty mortgage, and they wouldn't go out to restaurants for nice dinner. They'd compromise on holidays and weekends away and presents for the children, because their sole purpose was to have their mortgage paid off by the time they were 42. And my view was, well, that's great, but you might drop dead when you're 42 or 43, and you've not had the experiences, you've not gifted your children, you've not been to amazing. Why are people putting, I must get my house paid off ahead of visiting some amazing places on this planet, or going to nice restaurants and having great experiences, because bricks and mortar's more important? Is that a conditioning thing?
Yeah, I think we do that. I think we underestimate experiences, and I'm really hoping that the last 12 months and the whole pandemic stuff and how back our lives have been, I'm really hoping that starts to shift that mindset, because we trade experiences for material shit. And like really? And I had exactly this conversation with somebody just recently, and he was having sort of a bit like the same thing, a bit of that sort of crisis about where he was going. I think he was just like coming up to having a bit, what's this all about moment. And we got talking about his children, and he actually got quite emotional. And I said, honestly, your children will not ultimately thank you for giving them the latest technology. They just won't. They won't care. 6 months down the line, they won't care if they've got the latest iPhone or whatever, because there'll be another one coming along. I said, but the experiences you can give them, the time you can spend with them, that's the thing they really want. Children want your time. They don't want your money. And of course, we all need like a level that we're not stressing about our finances and we're not worrying where the next meal's coming from. Of course, we need that level, but we have to start looking at beyond that. And I think it's, it's society. I think it's Facebook, it's Instagram, it's all these amazing lives. And I think it's as well. It's like, you can become an Instagram influencer or whatever, like, in 5 minutes. And we just think that everybody can have that, and that, give that stuff up. It's nice stuff is great to have, but it should absolutely just be the sprinkles on top of the cupcake of an already amazing life.
But do you think, there's a phrase I use that is comparison is a thief of joy. There's so many people will compare themselves to other people and draw comparisons, when I always say, compare yourself to who you were yesterday. Why are we so bent out of shape as a society to compare ourselves with other people that we know nothing about?
Yeah. And it is that thing, and that's why I talk about the living with no regret stuff, and I talk about it a lot in my business, and I talk it a lot in my 9-step process that I take people through. And one of the exercises I get them to do is to write their eulogy. And that might sound quite harsh, but we need to just hold up that mirror, and we need to confront ourselves with what's going to be said about us at the end of our life. What's going to be said about us in terms of the type of person. And it isn't about going, we need to please other people and it's their judgment, but what do we want to be said about us? Because absolutely, maybe in a few, I'm sure somebody will Google it and find me some weird and wonderful example. But outside of that, nobody has written on their headstone, he had a really massive bank account. Yeah. Nobody has that. And actually, when we're all in the ground, then I'm okay. So you can buy some massive plot and have some amazing statue built on it. But at the end of the day, most graveyards you go to these days, they all look exactly the same. So, none of it matters. But, the only thing that gets said on headstones is about who we were. It says things about, loving husband or partner of or whatever. That's the stuff that gets written on there, and that's what matters when it comes down to it. It's who we were and how we behaved. And I think it's like we're living in a constant compare the market scenario of everybody else. And like it just don't matter. Who are these people we're comparing ourselves to, and I can absolutely guarantee that person that's like doing that flipping selfie, it's like massively filtered. They probably don't look anything like that when they get up in the morning. I can promise you that much. And their life isn't wonderful like that. And we that perspective is just completely missing, I think. And again, don't want to bang on about coronavirus, but I do really hope that sort of gives us a bit of perspective that goes, do you know what, when it's all stripped back, and actually it doesn't matter how much money you got, none of us can go out at the moment. None of us can see the people that we love. Doesn't matter how wealthy you are, the rules apply to all of us. So actually we're all like sitting at the same level at the minute. And I think that might actually just do us a bit of good.
But do you know what? I think, a lot of what I'm getting is there's been a lot of negatives over the last year, hasn't there? But, there's people are exercising more. I know we go out for a long walk every Saturday, Sunday that we'd always been saying we should do. We never did. We now do that religiously. My wife, who works a lot of hours, she's in a very kind of high powered role. She's spending more time with her children than she's ever spent. So I think some people are going to realize that they've missed out on things, that kind of regret. And they're now saying, I've got time with my children. I'm going out for walks and exercising. I never want to go back to a place where I'm working 75 hours a week.
Absolutely. And the thing is what we mustn't forget is that back before all of this happened, we didn't like normal very much. Yeah. We used to moan all the time about, like say, working all sorts of hours, having a crappy boss that we had to see every day, not spending enough time with our children. We used to moan about all of that stuff before this happened. So do you know what? you know, and I know it's the kind of new normal and we all get a bit tired with that phrase, but it is within our gift to then go, actually, I'm going to just spend a little bit of time thinking about, on the other side of this, what do I now want it to look like? It's been so stripped back and laid bare that actually I'm going to spend some time going, what are the bits that I'm going to put back in? And I'm going to consciously choose. And I know that there's some things where, you know, we might, you know, people might decide, well, you know, I'm going to go off and start my own business, and you can't just flick a light switch and just, you know, pack it all up and do that. You know, very few people can, but you can start to put the building blocks in place to get there and do that. Like I said, I stayed a year in corporate life, just over a year in corporate life, putting the building blocks in place in order to, you know, be able to leave and do what I'm doing. And so, you know, just consciously do it with a bit of thought. You know, we've got a bit of time, we've got some headspace. And like I said, you know, the process that I take people through is just hand holding them through that and walking through, what is it that I really want? Why does that matter to me? And making that emotional connection to it, you know, getting that motivation because it comes from the heart of what I really want and why it matters. And then start to look at, okay, so what are the things that I'm going to have to do to make that a reality? And it isn't, like I said, flicking a switch, but it's just bit by bit doing those. And like you say about it, it's about trying to just be a bit better today than I was yesterday. You know, it isn't a big bang approach, but it is just that, you know, that incremental change and improvement all the time. It doesn't, we're so conditioned that change has to be frightening, and it really doesn't need to be frightening at all. I think it can just be such an exciting opportunity.
No, too right. And I think this comparing yourself with others is bad enough, but then we also get bent out of shape with how we believe other people perceive us.
Yeah.
And you know, I think, and it's something I, you know, when I was in corporate, I was, you know, I wanted to drive this car and live in this house and wear these clothes because I thought that mattered. It doesn't. What I'm more bothered about now is my opinion of myself, my self-worth. And if somebody comes to me and says, Gary, I don't like the car you drive in, the house you live in, the clothes you're wearing, I don't care.
Yeah.
Because that opinion, they're not people I want in my circle. So what is this a social media thing? Is it a societal, a family thing? Why are we bothered about what other people think of us?
I think because we don't spend enough time thinking about like who we are and who we want to be. We don't spend time looking at that and going, how do I, you know, and again, this is sort of part of what I do in my business is actually, what square do I want to stand on? And how do I stand tall on that square?
Yeah.
And in the face of all this, you know, woulds and shoulds and opinions, and I think we're frightened to say what we really think, because again, you know, particularly on social media, it's like, woof, you know, everybody lands on you and just tells you what an idiot you are or whatever. But again, you know, who are these people? What is their expertise? How qualified are they? Apart from usually, you know, and again, we have to look at this, usually their opinion is driven by their own fear. You know, if you're doing something that they're criticizing you for, that's usually quite a good thing, because it usually means you're making them feel uncomfortable in some way, shape, or form. And it's probably because you're doing something that they would quite like to do, really, but they feel frightened. And their best way of dealing with that is to try and minimize you. And that's my point about dimming your light. Other people try and dim your light down because they are threatened by the fact that your light is shining brightly. So I think if you can own that your patch of the world and just really spend some time you know, really just looking at like, who am I and what really matters to me, and then like, yeah, just own that. Because I think you're right. I think so much of it is, you know, we should look like this and our house should look like that, and we should aspire to this car, or we should, you know, whatever else. And yeah, like you say, who cares? But for a long time, I was that person who not so much cared about what other people thought. I just didn't have any sense of my own value. I thought I was worthless. And it came from, you know, that view of myself came from a really, really young age. But like I said, it took a catastrophe in my life. All the signs were there all the way along. But it took a catastrophe in my life to really make me stop and think, who do I want to be going forward?
So to go from and I'm just trying to put this in context of those kind of watching it live and on replay. So, you know, if you kind of go back and look at your low self-worth was driving you to be in a relationship that perhaps you shouldn't be in, to be in a job that you shouldn't be in, to accept things in your life and career that perhaps you shouldn't have put up with, you know, if you then fast forward to where you are now, where would you say you are on that journey? Have you reset all of those switches? Is there still room for you to improve? Where are you on that journey, and what's been pivotal in helping you achieve that?
Yeah, I think I've moved massively. Like the dial has moved enormously. You know, and a lot of it is stuff that people can't see. You know, it's stuff on the inside, not stuff on the outside. But it's moved massively. However, am I fixed? No, definitely not. Because I think there is always that room for improvement. One of my things for many, many years, and particularly now, is I always believe like at the point at which we have nothing left to learn, that's the point where you just lie down and stop breathing, like, because life is done for you if you think there's nothing else to discover. Yeah. So I think there's always stuff to discover in the world. There's always stuff to discover about ourselves. So do I fall off the wagon sometimes? You know, yes, because some of those scars of what happened to me are very, very deep. And you know, my last relationship, the one that imploded in 2018, it was actually emotionally abusive, and I'd kept that mostly to myself. So I'd spent 18 months being emotionally abused very severely in that relationship. And because of my outward need to sort of, you know, be successful and sort of go into work every day and be this leader of other people, I was completely ashamed to admit to people that that's what I was going through. So some of those scars run very deep. I think the difference now is I absolutely know what the scars are. I know the sorts of things that I can recognize them when they trigger me. So I know that that scar is being picked at with particular things. So, you know, are there days when I fall off the wagon? Yeah, completely. You know, I'm not here being like sunshine and positivity and like, oh, I've made it every single minute of every single day. Definitely not. But the difference now is I've got tools, I've got techniques, I've got rituals that I go back to, structure that I put into my life that I know are the things that foundation that I rely on. And those are the things that are really important to me. So I do gratitude every day. And I know that some people think that's a bit woo-woo, and I think I did before I started doing it. But it's absolutely amazing. I do a daily gratitude journal. I meditate every day. I've massively got into my fitness. So anybody that looks at any of my website stuff, and Ade knows this better than ever anyone, because Ade's done my pictures of me in my boxing gear and stuff. I wasn't doing any of that in 2018. I danced, I was a dancer, but other than that, I did nothing. I didn't go to the gym. I didn't do fitness. And now I train 5 days a week. And I'm not saying that everybody needs to turn their life around by becoming an athlete, but I have completely transformed myself in terms of doing that stuff. So knowing that I have those things that help with my mental health, they help with my physical health, then, you know, it's having that structure and those routines. And I talk a lot in my business. So whilst the end point for me is about helping people to define their happy and getting them to reach it, what I also talk about is positivity, because positivity isn't the same as happiness. Positivity is a relative of happiness and helps us to achieve it. But positivity is knowing that you can get through the bad days as well as enjoy the good ones. And I focused on that a lot in my business, because that developing that positivity, developing those tools and techniques that even when things are bad, whether it's a bad 5 minutes, a bad hour, a bad day, a bad week, but positivity is that self-belief that you have the ability and the tools and techniques that will get you through that bad time and you'll get back to the good.
Fantastic. And I want to just touch on in a few moments about some of the elements of this 9-step process that you use when you're working with your clients. Do you, just picking up on something you said there, when you were in a relationship that was emotionally abusive and you were kind of you were almost putting this veneer up that everything was okay. Do you think this, and this could be in a personal scenario or a business scenario, but do you think there's a perception that showing vulnerability is suggesting that you're weak, and that's not a good thing? And I see this a lot from business owners that are afraid to put their hand up and say they need help because it shows weakness. Why are we afraid to be vulnerable?
So I think because vulnerability is I think it's Brené Brown, who I love her stuff, but she talks about, I think vulnerability is like this doing something without any guarantees. And so when we do something and we're vulnerable, there's no guarantee of kind of success or acceptance. And I think that vulnerability comes a lot from our fear of not belonging. So it's also where shame comes from. Shame comes from the fear that we won't belong. And I did a lot of research in this, not sort of during my transformation, but prior to that, where, you know, our need to belong, we have to understand, is like a massive kind of like primeval urge that we need to belong to something. Because, you know, back when, you know, man was evolving, And, you know, if we didn't belong to the group, we died, you know, and we don't, and we have to sort of remember that it's that deep an urge for us to belong to something. And so we do whatever it takes to belong, because we are absolutely programmed in our DNA, is that if we sit as an outsider to the group, then we are furthest away from food, from warmth, and, you know, at its very primeval level, because this was a case, we were furthest away from sort of status and power, which meant we were furthest away from sex. So all of those primal urges of those things that we sort of want and need, all are based on that need to belonging to something. The difference is that obviously society has exploded in terms of the population, so we now sort of need to think more locally about what we belong to. And I think that's, again, part of what I do with my process, is look at what you belong to and who you belong with, and really looking at that network you have around you, because no longer are we sort of roaming the savannah, and no longer are we sort of living in those much smaller communities in that way that are about our own survival. Our sense of belonging now, we need to gain our perspective. That sense of belonging isn't going to be the difference between like having food or not, but our sense of belonging is about who we surround ourselves with. And we don't spend enough time, and I have to say we're not ruthless enough about who we spend our time with and what they bring or what they take away from us. So for me, it, you know, that's a lot of where it comes from. And I think that's the thing with the vulnerability. You know, we're desperate to belong, we're desperate to be accepted, and therefore we just see that vulnerability is a weakness. And one of the massive things that I do is I'm absolutely, when my world imploded, I absolutely learned firsthand how to stick my hand up and go, will you help me please?
Everybody needs help at some point, don't they?
They do. And I wouldn't, like I said, if I hadn't have rung my friend from my car that day and said, I need help because something is seriously wrong here, I like I said, I wouldn't be here today. So for me, it's that fundamental.
And Carolyn, in a personal sense and in a business sense, because, you know, for me, this has got a business owner perspective to it. What are the consequences of not tackling this issue? You know, if you're living your life or running your business to preset paradigms to how other people think you should go about doing business, you know, going through the motions when something needs to change, not putting your hand up and saying something's broken. What in your view, what have you seen and heard? What are the consequences of not breaking that mold?
I just think we end up miserable. And again, you know, we allow ourselves. In fact, I posted something to this effect on social media actually. Only I think it went out this morning. But you know, that thing of we allow ourselves to stay in that state of misery because we're frightened of change, because we're worried that change will sort of, you know, bring us to ruin, that everything will crumble around us. And again, you know, it goes back to, you know, I talk about the 5 regrets of the dying, and it goes back to that thing of, which I didn't write, by the way. They come from sort of fantastic research by a palliative care nurse over sort of 25 years of her career and working with people, obviously at the end of their lives. But you know, that massive sense of regret, I think, and you know, we sort of allow ourselves to sit in this misery, and also we allow other people, if we don't take that long hard look at who's around us, we allow other people to kind of suck that happiness away from us, and we tolerate the wrong people. And so much of what I went through in my life on a personal basis, and as it turned out when I looked at it in a professional basis, I just allowed the wrong people. You know, not saying that they were necessarily trying to be bad per se, but they just weren't the right people for me. I just allowed them to stay around me and in proximity to influence me, to influence how I felt about myself, about my life, what I should be doing. You know, if you're not out there and living the life that you ought to be living, then what's the flipping point? Like, you know, like we're just going to get to the end of our days and go like, well, what, you know, what was the point of that?
And it is those consequences, isn't it? You know, that at some point, whether it's in work, retirement, whether it's on your deathbed, some of those people are going to say, you know, I wish I'd have worked less hours. I wish I'd have spent more time with my children. I wish I'd have traveled more. I wish I'd have put my hand up and asked for help, you know. And, you know, I know people use this phrase, you know, life is too short. It's actually the longest thing we're ever going to experience.
Yeah.
So for me, why would you go a day, a week, a month where you're unhappy deal with it, you know, tackle it head on. And you might go through some short-term pain for sure, but you know, we've got 10, 20, 30, 40 years ahead of us.
Yeah. Yeah, and just it is about that, and that's the thing, and I hear it a lot, you know. And I had a conversation with somebody just last week actually, who is you know, in their 50s, in a marriage that they don't want to be in, and really having to face into that now, because I said, so tell me about your retirement. And, you know, they started to talk about that. And I said, because like, come your retirement, you're going to be with that person all the time. So what are you going to do about that? And I said, I really started to, and I said, are you screaming inside right now at the thought of that? And he went, yeah. And I said, that scream is only going to get louder if you don't deal with it. I said, and it's no good dealing with it the day before you retire. You need to deal with it now, because you've got time now to then put in place the things that you want, so that that future and that retirement is exactly what you want it to be. And the longer that you procrastinate, the longer that you let this continue, it's just going to get more painful.
Because it's harder.
Yeah, so much harder. And I think that's the thing. And I think, you know, and it's interesting. I don't know if you, because like, indulge me for a second, but I'd really like to run through like what the 5 regrets of the dying are, because I think that, like I said, it's not stuff that I wrote, but really, really quickly, because I think it's quite surprising sometimes what they are. So the first one is, I wish I'd had the courage to live a life true to myself, not the life others expected of me. The second is, I wish I hadn't worked so hard. The third is, I wish I'd had the courage to express my feelings. The fourth is, I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. And the fifth, I wish I had let myself be happier. So that is 25 years of experience of, like I said, a palliative care nurse speaking to people at the end of their life. Those are the 5 regrets of the dying. And that's what they boil down to.
And I don't think any of those will surprise anybody. And, you know, for those watching, you know, that 1 or 2 of those may resonate sometimes, occasionally. But, you know, for me, you know, I've been through that scenario, you know, whether it's, you know, leaving my first marriage or walking out of a job or whatever it might be, cutting friends out that weren't right for you. You know, you've got to go through that short-term pain, haven't you, to get that longer-term happiness.
Definitely. And one of the tools that I have in my framework is called the collaboration compass. And that is a tool whereby we help people look at the people that they have around them. And, you know, I would encourage people to do it, like, if you can, when times are good. Because if you do that when times are good, you know, when the proverbial hits the fan, you know who you got and you know who you would go to for what thing. So what the collaboration compass does is it sort of helps you to look at all the people you have. It helps you then to look at who the key people are in the different areas of your life, but it then helps you to sort of characterize them in terms of what is it that they bring to your life. And each of those characters that we look at, also those sort of character types, we look at what that character type is when they operate positively in your life. And we look at what they do when they operate negatively within your life, so you can really see them for what they are. So to give an example of that, one of those character types is called the entertainer. Yeah. So you might need that person when you have a bit of a rough time and you want to, you know, you want to give them a call or, you know, go out for a drink or whatever that is. You know, back when we're able to do that, you know, but that person that's going to pick you up is going to make you laugh. The thing is that quite often the entertainer will be also the one that will lead you astray. So when they're at their negative, they'll be the one that's probably emptying your bank account because you spent it all going to the pub. Yeah. Just having a good time and having a laugh. And therefore you need the other characters in your world to then bring all of that sense of balance. So the reason that there's 12 is that, you know, when it happened to me, I took a really long, hard look at who I had and who helped me, and it helped me to define what these character types are. But they all have you know, an upside and a downside depending on what's dialed up. But we really need to spend that time, particularly when things are good. Like I said, I mean, sometimes you have to do it, you know, in the moment when things are going wrong. But, you know, we need to make hay whilst the sun shines. So do that kind of work when things are okay and fairly stable in your life. Look at who those people are that you've got around you, because having that network is so fundamental. Whether it's, you know, you can do it from a business point of view, you can do it from a personal point of view, but really understand, who are you going to go to? Who do you go to for advice? Who do you go to as that listening ear? Who do you go to when you're worried in terms of your finances or need that support? And actually, the thing that I learned when my world imploded was people love to help. Good people love to help.
Yeah.
And I realized, we always sort of were programmed to think, oh, like, I'm going to this person, I'm asking for help, and I feel really bad doing that. And will they want to help me and all the rest of it? What I realized is how much those people went, wow, she values me. She values my expertise in this area. And they felt that they had value. They felt like worthwhile. And I had one friend in particular who was a massive sort of counsel to me. But, I sort of said, like, oh my God, you're just so wonderful. You're so helpful. And she was like, no, you're not understanding. I love spending time with you. And actually, I get loads out of it in terms of, my experience. And a lot of those relationships are reciprocal. And yes, there might be occasions if you're having a particularly bad time that you pull on them more than they pull on you, but it will always be, a healthy relationship will be a reciprocal relationship. Absolutely. And the quality of our relationships, actually scientifically, is proven that the quality of the relationships we have actually helps us to live longer. So if you want to live a longer life, get quality people around you, because it is scientifically proven that it makes us happier and it does help us to live longer.
And lose the detractors.
Oh my God. Yeah. So the scale I have in terms of the collaboration compass is we look at everybody on a scale from joyful to toxic. And then we look at them on a scale from frequent to infrequent in terms of our contact. And when we talk about contact, that might be not actual physical contact, but how much time, for example, does, I don't know, your mother spend in your head, like, telling you you're not good enough or whatever that might be. So it's sort of how frequently they influence you and you're thinking about you and your life. So we look at them on a grid, and then it helps us to position where people are. And then what that helps you to do is dial up the really good ones. So, the joyful ones you want to, spend more time with, whatever that time looks like. And the toxic ones, obviously, you want to dial down. Now, you might not be able to lose them completely. So they might be somebody who, for example, if they are a family member, you're probably not going to be able to avoid them completely. But it's trying to influence their influence on you by maybe it's spending less time with them, but also actually when they are like that with you, what's your response in your head? So it's dialing up like how positive you feel and dialing down the sort of negative influence, because quite often it's just about what we tell ourselves in our heads or what we let them to tell us and how that gets into our thinking. So it might be physical time you spend, but it might also just be time that you need to not let them like be in your mind.
And it's how you let that negativity affect you, if at all. And it's being able to manage that and control that, isn't it?
Yeah, totally. And it is difficult, but we tell ourselves stories. So that's the other thing, is when that's happening. So whether you're letting somebody negative influence you, either in your mind or physically, but actually to work back that story. So understand, is it about them and what they're saying? Is it about a story you've got in your head already? And work back where that story comes from. Where does it originate from? So if you think you're not good enough at something, where did that story start from? And it takes a bit of effort, but you have to work back through that and go, actually, it comes from here. So I'm letting this person over here press a button for me, but actually it's not so much about that person. It's about the button I'm allowing them to press.
Yes.
And therefore it's working that bit out. And therefore, when they are like that, you can just go, no, that's okay. That's pushing my blah button, usually from our past experience, our childhood, something that happened to us when we were sort of in our, reasonably formative years, but not letting them press that button in the same way, just recognizing the button and then going, yeah, okay, that's fine. I've noted the button. I'm just going to move on.
And these just to kind of summarize, these are the things that you help clients with, is, how you're going to respond when somebody presses that button. And it's turning these into coping strategies and strategies that can overcome these kind of issues.
Yeah, very much so. So what I have within Mayday is something called the Fathom framework. So the Fathom framework is a 9-step process that I work people through, which kind of, I describe it as it takes you from their happy, whoever they are, to you're happy. And that's the point of the 9-step process. So it is all about that, getting clarity. It's in 3 stages. So each of the stages has 3 steps within it, but it's absolutely just sort of holding somebody's hand, walking them through it step by step. And if people at the outset aren't sure if they want to do all 9 steps, I'm just launching my first online course, which the online course is just the first 3 steps. So the first 3 steps are just all about helping you to understand, like, where are you right now? Let's just do a little bit of that audit about sort of where you are at the minute. Starting to articulate where you want to be. So that first step, like, where are you, is about, it's called all at sea. So it's like, oh, I'm all over the place. Like, where am I? Next step is called finding land. So it's all about, where do I want to be? So trying to put a pin in the map of where you want to go. And then the third step is called identifying rocks. So that's really about saying, like, what is the problem that I actually need to face? Now, there might be a number of problems, but it's about that, for all intents and purposes, it's about a Pareto analysis, essentially, and saying, okay, what is the most important problem that I need to tackle first? So once we've got a sense of that, then that's the launch pad to then go on and do sort of subsequent steps of the process. But it is about that hand holding step by step. And as part of that, like you say, we start looking at, who are those people that you've got around you? Are they toxic or joyful? And what's the mechanism that you're going to use? What the decisions that you're going to make, conscious decisions about dealing with those people? What are they? And also we help with some of the, like, how do you have that conversation as well? So how do you start that conversation that you might need to have with somebody? Whether it's sort of dialing up a positive person, joyful person, to see more of them, or having to deal with a more negative one.
Absolutely. And these are all about helping the people that you work with to live the right life, not the one that others want you to live, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
I'm kind of conscious of time, and I want to leave some time in a minute or so for some Q&A. Look, Carolyn, you've been refreshingly honest. You've been probably as honest as any of the guests I've had on the webinar over the last year. And I know 1 or 2 comments, Mike Roberts and 1 or 2 others have said that. And that's what I love about you, is that you are raw with it, because if business owners don't get raw and they put this veneer on, then they're not going to peel back and get to the root of the problem. But for those that have not seen it, you've obviously released a book recently with quite a catchy title. Do you just want to tell everybody the title of the book and just a quick 30-second synopsis of what that book's all about?
Yeah, so I know I did let a swear word sneak out once already, so I should have apologized at the time, and I'm going to apologize again, because my book has a swear word in the title. But my book is called All the Twats I Met Along the Way. So it's a memoir. It's about my life from sort of about my mid-teens up until my world imploded. Like you say, it's a very unflinching look, and it's all about growing up, falling over, picking yourself back up. It's about failing. It's about making mistakes. It's about the messiness of adult life. And what I really wanted to do, like you say, is be brutally honest and not put on any of that veneer. So I'll be really honest. There's a couple of times when I'm sure some people reading it will think that I'm one of the twats I met along the way. And I absolutely hold my hands up that I was. But it's just all about just how it's quite messy being an adult, and that we're all just trying to work it out as we go along. And I truly believe we just need to be a bit more honest about that.
Absolutely. Carolyn, thank you so much. If I just want to open this up for any observations, any questions, I'm sure there are loads. I know there's been 1 or 2 people asking just for clarification on some of those regrets. I think hopefully
do you want me to run through them again?
No, I think if we need to do so, we will do. I think we've Sally and Jane between them have managed to resolve it. Who's got a question for us, please? Justin.
Yeah, sorry. It was more a thought I was actually really thinking about. That it was a fantastic talk, Carolyn. Fantastic. Some of the things you say, though, about feeling worthless or really worrying about what your colleagues think, I was just thinking from a business point of view, and I'm ashamed to say it's taken me almost half a century to get this, but I really strongly believe that every CEO, number 1 task is to get the best out of his team. Leave the cash flow to your finance director. Now, that's an easy, glib thing to say. But the way that I have realized this only happens is really making sure you get to know your staff. It doesn't matter how big or how small your company is, you've really got to know them. And strangely enough, Zoom and Teams has made it easier. Quite a lot of the times I walked into our factory, which is not a very big factory, but you will maybe have a quick chat to your guys, but they're worried about really letting on what they're worried about. So Teams and Zooms, if you really do push them, that they will then open up. And I think if you can make your staff really happy with their work, a lot of the personal problems you were saying, that really helps. We do find, and I'm not saying our company is exactly a church, but we do find if they're happy at home, it helps their home life hugely. And I've come to realize, and as Carrie knows, our company is called Synergy, but it is actually, that was the technical for our technology. But I've started to realize it is the synergy of the people that is the absolute critical thing. And I would say that every single boss needs to really recognize that's his number one job. And without that, he won't build a successful company. And I would just say that if you're unhappy with yourself, it is very often that you can't communicate with your boss. And if you really can't, then you should leave the job. But often it's worth just ringing your boss up and saying, do you know what, do you mind if I just have a chat with you on a one-to-one? And that would be my thought for this. Anyway,
Justin, great observation. And you know, whether you're a male leader, a female leader, you know, really getting the best out of your team is about making sure that they're happy, they've got no problems, they've got open and clear lines of communication. It's critical in any business. So great observation.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, I spent over 20 years in HR. I think we've got a huge leadership crisis globally, but I think in the UK, huge.
Some of the worst people are running the big businesses, and they've got no understanding of people. They've been brought out, and I did the Harvard Masters. I know how they think. They don't understand their people. That's their number asset. They'll stand up in front of all their team and say, you're the most important key asset of the company, and within 2 seconds as they've walked off the stage, they've forgotten what they've said. And just on that, for a bit of value add, there's a really fantastic book, who I can't pronounce the guy's name because he's Polish, I think he is, but there's a really fantastic book called Why Do So Many Incompetent Men Become Leaders and How to Stop It. And it's written by a guy, so it is, you know, but what the point of the book, and it is again based on science, it's a really good book, but it's absolutely about how those more female traits, so it's not just about saying, oh, we need to say all the leaders need to be females themselves, but those female traits, the kind of things that you've just talked about, absolutely science demonstrates it makes people much happier when we do that, and therefore much more productive. So it's a really good read, and worth having a look at.
Fantastic, thank you. Any more questions, please? Anybody?
I can't believe Aid hasn't got one about my boxing or something like that.
Can I ask a question, Gary?
Yep, please.
Carolyn, I thought you were fantastic. One of the things we're starting to do is go through in depth, trying to understand our employees. I run there's 12 of us in my recruitment agency in Wakefield, and the thing, we've only just started the process. We've always done monthly reviews, but actually trying to dig down into what makes everybody tick, especially with everything we've all gone through for the last year. And I just welcome your advice, really. The thing I'm not struggling with yet, because we only just started the progress. So the thing I may struggle with is where do I draw the line? You know, as in what? And I guess answering my own question might be, I'll be led by them to be able to tell me what they want to tell me. But obviously, there's some things. You know, I know Gary's a mad Leeds fan, but you know, you obviously won't want to admit that. But you know, there's some things where you will want to admit, and some things you won't admit. Sorry, Gary.
For me, in any environment, it's about creating safety. So people will start to share stuff if they feel safe. And you know, what makes people feel safe, you know, will probably differ from person to person. But the underlying thing is, you know, do you practice what you preach? Are there consequences, negative consequences of sharing stuff and showing you're vulnerable, and really looking at what's going on in your culture about that. So, you know, it might be that, you know, somebody shares something and then it becomes a bit of a butt of a joke. And it's like, well, you need to make sure that joke doesn't come too far, because like, what does that say to everyone else? It's like, actually, if I share something, everyone just takes the piss. So creating safety for individuals where, you know, and don't expect it, like I said, to be like a light switch where like suddenly they go, oh, let me tell you all about my personal life. You know, just incrementally do that stuff. And I'd say do it in the informal ways. You know, it's great if you've got formal reviews and whatever else. I hate appraisals. I think they're like the devil's work. I didn't like them being done to me. Don't like doing them to anyone else. I advocate the removal of them in a business, but I advocate really good quality conversations and really regularly, and just letting people know you actually listen. You know, there is, and again, I know it's a cliche, but we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Like, use them in proportion, and you know, just spend time with people and just know that it's just going to be that incremental thing, but create a safe environment for them to be able to say what they feel and what's going on, and give it time and stick at it. Don't think, well, I've been doing this for like a month and like nobody's telling me anything. It's just going to take time, and let them know that there are no negative consequences, but only positive ones of sharing it with you.
Isn't it, for me, it's about creating an environment of trust. They're going to say something they're not happy with because they trust it's going to get listened to and it's going to get dealt with and it's going to get communicated. The problem is lack of trust. You know, and certainly when I was in corporate, I felt if I said something that was out of turn, even though it was correct, that I would get, you know, ridiculed for it, or I would get lambasted for it, or whatever. And so for me, it's about opening up and making sure the lines of trust there. And that's just a basic leadership trait.
Yeah, and that's my point about safety. You know, it's trust by a different word. And I did a whole load of study about this. One of my massive hobby horses is around trust, and particularly organizational trust. But it is about those behaviors. It is about those traits. And it's the stuff that you do when nobody's watching. Because I tell you what, just when you think nobody's watching, they're flipping watching. So it's about, you know, and we all do, oh, let's like have our corporate values, and like, or like, you know, the number of corporates that just don't live by their values. And, you know, if there's times when you don't live by your values, you've got to hold your hand up and go, you're right. And you've got to create an environment where it's okay for people to challenge you when you don't live in line with those values, or you don't live in line with what you say. But so much of it is, you know, we're just going to stamp somebody out. You know, they're threatening my leadership. You know, and the person that, like you say, raises something is, oh, funnily enough, like 3 weeks later, they've like gone, and everyone's going like, you know, here's so-and-so's coffee mug, but like, where is he? Has anybody seen him? And like, they just disappear.
And that's back to your original anecdote of when somebody said something inappropriate to you, but it was you that lost your job as a result. So we've gone full circle, haven't we? Carolyn, I'm going to leave it there for this afternoon because we're up on time. That was absolutely amazing. It was really raw, really insightful. I'm sure on reflection, there's going to be a lot of people just questioning a few ways to go about doing things in their personal life or in the business life. And if we've made 1 or 2 people think about 1 or 2 of those things differently, then we've served our purpose. So Carolyn, I'm sure people are going to want to engage with you, contact you. Where's the best place that people can connect with you?
So LinkedIn is always great. So you'll find me on LinkedIn, and you'll find both me, and you'll find the Mayday business page. And then on my website, so mayday.co.uk, and just so that everyone's clear, Hobday is spelled D-E-Y, even though it's pronounced D-A-Y. So D-E-Y, and Mayday is the same. So M-A-Y-D-E-Y, just like my surname. So yeah, mayday.co.uk is where you can find me on my website, but LinkedIn is the best place to get me.
I'll put the link to both of those on the email that goes out with a copy of the recording tomorrow. So as I said at the foot, you know, really dialing into purpose is important for business owners and leaders, just to really get a grip of what's important to them. And I think really just living that best life is critical for me. You know, some great comments here. Aid, fantastic. Sally, great. Really, really kind of insightful hour. Jane Fisher, thank you so much. Some fantastic stuff. Loved it. Passionate, engaging, great listen. Carolyn, thank you so much. Just for those that are on this afternoon, the next webinar is going to be in a month's time. It's going to be with a lady called Emma Stirk. She is a coach, but she is also a lawyer. And Emma's going to talk to us about the importance of having all your legals in place, because certainly I had a bad experience of this. You know, you often don't think in the early stages of business you need all your legals until you get bitten on the ass, and guess what? You wish you would have had them. So she's going to talk about the importance of getting all your T's and C's and your contracts in place. But for now, Carolyn, it just leaves me to say thank you again for being so raw, so honest, and so insightful. And I wish you all a very, very good day. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.